Welcome back. In today's episode, I'm counting down the most chilling cases of people whose final, terrifying photos captured them right before they were ripped apart by deadly animals. From a Florida boat deck where a massive bull shark was dragged on board for a reckless selfie, to a Canadian photographer's final devastating meeting with a stalking mountain lion.
It was the 18th of June, 2018, and the rural stretch of South Africa outside a small regional town was sitting in the dry warmth of a southern hemisphere winter afternoon. The facility was not a sanctuary in any formal or regulated sense. It was a privately run operation on an unmarked property, accessible by a dirt road that connected to a secondary highway, with several outdoor enclosures and a small building that served as a visitor's area. The man who operated it ran tourist interactions out of informal contact, a name passed along by someone who knew someone, a number, an invitation extended to people who seemed interested and willing to pay for access they could not get elsewhere. Elowen Wraith was 23 years old and on a photography-focused gap year trip through South Africa after finishing a hospitality management program in Savannah, Georgia. She was, by every account from people who knew her, outgoing and genuinely curious, someone who responded to invitations by accepting them and figured out the details afterward. She had no particular background in large carnivores, no training in reading cat behavior, and no reason to have developed either. She had been traveling for months and was accustomed to encounters that were unusual by most people's standards and had gone fine. Listen. The man had told her the young adult male lion inside the enclosure was accustomed to people. That was the whole of the safety briefing. And for me, I don't trust that. African lions are the second largest big cat species in the world. Adult males in their prime weigh between 330 and 500 pounds and carry nearly that entire mass in the chest, shoulders, and forelimbs, the parts of the animal involved in a predatory lunge. They are not domesticated. Captivity does not alter the underlying behavioral architecture of a large predator. What changes with human exposure is the threshold for fear response. Lions that have spent time around people are less likely to flee, which is a different thing from being safe. The behavioral signals that precede an attack in a captive lion are the same ones that precede an attack in the wild. A fixed gaze, a lowering of the head and shoulder line, a tail in steady lateral motion, flattened ears, a posture that shifts the animal's weight toward its hindquarters. These are not subtle. They are the body language of an animal that has committed to a decision, and they appear clearly and in sequence before the animal moved. The lion had reportedly been rotating through tourist interactions for several hours before Elowen arrived. The handler, who was supposed to be supervising the enclosure, was absent that afternoon. The animal was already showing the signs of an animal that had spent too long in a stimulating, disruptive environment and was running low on whatever tolerance it had extended to the people moving through its space. Elowen crouched inside the enclosure near the lion while the man encouraged her to move closer. The lion was pacing. Its tail was in motion. Its ears had flattened. Its gaze had fixed directly on her with the quality of attention that distinguishes territorial or predatory focus from indifferent observation. She was looking at her phone, framing the shot, with her back partially toward the animal. When the lion lunged, the man backed out of the enclosure and did not re-enter. Emergency responders arrived to a scene where Elowen was still inside the enclosure and the animal had not been secured. The intervention came too late. Authorities shut down the facility during the investigation. The man who invited her in and did not re-enter faced legal consequences. Several warning behaviors had reportedly been visible in the seconds before the lion moved. Witnesses reconstructed them afterward. No one inside the enclosure at the moment of the attack had been in a position to act on any of it. In my opinion, the fatal mistake was treating a stressed captive lion like a photo prop instead of what it actually was, a powerful wild predator with no real margin for error.
It was August 3rd, 2016, when Mia Glint stepped out of her rental car into the sweltering heat of Kruger National Park, South Africa, unaware that she was about to become another tragic statistic in one of Africa's most dangerous wildlife reserves. The 24-year-old retail assistant manager from Manchester had saved for 2 years to afford this dream safari with her boyfriend Tyler Baines, a 26-year-old mechanic who shared her passion for adventure but lacked experience with African wildlife safety protocols. The couple had been driving through Kruger's vast wilderness on a self-guided safari, following dusty dirt roads through acacia-dotted savanna where the afternoon sun beat down mercilessly. Mia's Instagram account was filled with wildlife photos from their journey, each post gathering hundreds of likes from followers who envied her African adventure. She was an enthusiastic traveler who documented her experiences, always searching for the perfect shot to capture the raw beauty of the natural world. Earlier that morning, other vehicles had reported lions resting near this stretch of road, and park signs throughout Kruger were clear about the most fundamental safety rule: remain inside vehicles at all times. Rangers repeated this message during park orientation, explaining that stepping outside meant entering the territory of apex predators. Warning signs were posted every few kilometers, showing graphic reminders of what happens to visitors who ignore these life-saving rules. Several lions were lying in tall golden grass, roughly 60 yards from the dirt road, when Mia made her fatal decision. The cats appeared relaxed in the afternoon heat, their tawny bodies barely visible among the sun-bleached vegetation. Tyler stood beside their open car door, camera in hand, capturing what he believed were safe photographs from the required distance. But for Mia, the distance wasn't close enough for the dramatic selfie she envisioned. African lions are among the continent's most powerful predators, with adult males weighing up to 420 pounds and females reaching 280 pounds of muscle and lethal instinct. These hunters can sprint up to 50 miles per hour in short bursts, relying on stealth and explosive acceleration to ambush prey. Their claws grip and tear flesh, while their powerful jaws clamp onto prey with devastating strength. Ignoring Tyler's warning, Mia walked several steps farther from the vehicle towards the grass to improve the angle of her selfie. She crouched slightly while holding her phone outward, trying to frame the distant lions behind her. That small movement, lowering herself and moving farther from the car, made her appear smaller and more vulnerable against the open savanna. Tyler continued taking pictures from beside the car, unaware that one lioness had begun moving silently through the tall grass. The predator advanced slowly, keeping low as it stalked through the vegetation. Its tawny coat blended seamlessly with the dried grass as it crept closer in careful stages. By the time the predator was within roughly 10 meters, Mia remained completely focused on her phone camera, adjusting angles to ensure the lions were visible in the background. The crouched posture and distance from the vehicle triggered the lioness's hunting instincts, presenting a profile that resembled vulnerable prey. The attack came with explosive suddenness as the lioness burst from the grass in a blur of muscle and deadly intent. After stalking close, the predator charged forward, covering the final distance in powerful strides before launching toward Mia. The impact slammed into her with devastating force, sending her crashing to the ground as nearly 280 pounds of predator struck with overwhelming momentum. Instead of crushing bone, the lioness clamped its jaws tightly around Mia's throat in a classic predatory kill bite. The powerful grip compressed the trachea and carotid arteries, cutting off airflow and blood supply within seconds. Mia struggled briefly beneath the weight of the animal as the predator maintained the suffocating hold while pinning her to the ground. Within moments, Mia's movements slowed as oxygen deprivation caused rapid unconsciousness. The lioness kept the throat hold for several seconds longer, ensuring the prey stopped moving before loosening its grip. The predator's powerful forelegs pressed down across her shoulders, preventing any chance of escape, while the fatal grip remained locked in place. The lion then dragged the motionless body several feet toward the grass, following instincts to move prey away from the road. Only when nearby vehicles approached with engines roaring did the lioness release its grip and retreat into the vegetation, leaving behind a scene of horror. Park rangers arrived within roughly 20 minutes, but Mia was already beyond help. Investigators later determined that death was most consistent with rapid suffocation and vascular compression from the throat bite. Kruger officials used the tragedy to reinforce their safety protocols, emphasizing that the park's rules exist to prevent exactly this type of avoidable death. The incident sent shockwaves through the travel community, with many questioning how someone could ignore such basic safety guidelines. Mia's family requested privacy while grieving their devastating loss, though they later supported park efforts to educate visitors about wildlife safety. It was August 22, 2016, when wildlife videographer Corbin Dax made his final descent into Lamar Valley. The early morning mist clung to the Yellowstone River as it wound through the expansive grasslands, creating an ethereal backdrop that had drawn photographers to this deceptively accessible stretch of Yellowstone's valley. The roadside pullout where Corbin parked offered sweeping views of the valley floor, where elk herds typically gathered during the rutting season. At 34, Corbin had built a reputation for capturing intimate wildlife footage that others deemed too dangerous to attempt. His companions that morning included a 29-year-old seasonal park volunteer and a 36-year-old outdoor gear marketing consultant, both experienced in backcountry filming. The trio had arrived before sunrise, hoping to document the increased grizzly activity that recent park bulletins had reported near the riverbanks. The signs were everywhere for those who knew how to read them. Fresh scat dotted the trail leading down to the water's edge, while overturned stones and deeply clawed cottonwood trunks marked the presence of a large predator. The morning air carried the musky scent of bear, and disturbed vegetation along the water's edge suggested recent feeding activity. Yellowstone cutthroat trout spawning had drawn grizzlies to the riverbanks in unprecedented numbers. Grizzly bears are among North America's most formidable predators, capable of reaching speeds of 35 miles per hour and possessing among the strongest bite forces of any land mammal. Adult males can weigh up to 800 pounds, with razor-sharp claws extending up to 4 inches. As fog lifted from the river, Corbin made his fatal decision. Against established safety protocols, he descended the steep cut bank alone, seeking a lower angle for his shot. His companions remained near the vehicle, assuming he would maintain visual contact and return quickly. Corbin had switched his camera to burst mode, anticipating the perfect sequence of shots as the morning light filtered through the mist. The grizzly emerged from the willow thickets without warning, its massive frame moving with surprising stealth along the riverbank. Corbin's finger was already pressing the shutter release when the bear reared up on its hind legs, releasing a guttural warning huff that echoed across the water. His camera captured the moment in perfect detail, the massive dark shape barely visible through his 400mm lens, yet startlingly close even at that magnification. The sudden movement of raising his camera triggered the bear's defensive response. The animal dropped to all fours and launched forward in a bluff charge, stopping just yards away with another explosive vocalization, jaws popping, ears pinned flat against its skull. But Corbin's panicked retreat up the unstable slope triggered the bear's predatory instinct to pursue fleeing prey. His camera, still set to burst mode, continued firing automatically as he stumbled backward, 23 frames captured in those final seconds, the last showing nothing but a blur of brown fur filling the entire frame as the grizzly charged directly toward the lens. The grizzly closed the remaining distance in seconds, its powerful legs propelling nearly 600 pounds of muscle and bone across the riverbank with terrifying efficiency. The initial impact sent Corbin tumbling backward onto the rocky ground, his camera flying from his hands. The grizzly was upon him instantly, delivering several crushing bites to his upper body and head, while its massive weight pinned him against the earth. Even after Corbin's body went limp, the grizzly continued its assault, driven by defensive aggression and adrenaline. Only when distant shouts from Corbin's companions echoed down the slope did the bear finally lumber away into the dense willows, casting backward glances as it retreated. Emergency responders arrived within the hour, but the massive blunt force trauma and crush injuries had already claimed another victim to Yellowstone's unforgiving wilderness. When investigators recovered Corbin's camera from the rocky ground nearby, they discovered that it had continued recording even after the attack began, its internal microphone capturing 47 seconds of horrifying audio that would become crucial evidence in understanding the bear's behavior, though the footage was deemed too disturbing for public release. Park officials launched a comprehensive investigation, ultimately determining that the attack resulted from a surprise encounter with a defensive grizzly protecting its feeding territory. Corbin Corbin's family established a wildlife safety foundation in his memory, emphasizing the importance of maintaining safe distances from dangerous predators and following established protocols in bear country. The legacy of that August morning extended far beyond the immediate tragedy. Park rangers began implementing stricter enforcement of wildlife viewing distances, with mandatory bear safety orientations for anyone venturing into the backcountry with camera equipment. Cars were stopped bumper to bumper on a mountain road outside Brasov, Romania. It was September 17, 2016, and the Carpathian foothills were doing what they'd done every tourist season for years. Bears had wandered out of the tree line to pick through garbage left by motorists, and people had pulled over to watch. It happens so often along these roads that locals barely slow down anymore. The road had yellow warning signs in Romanian, English, German, and Hungarian. Pictograms of bears. Do not approach. Do not feed. The signs had been there for years and made no difference whatsoever. Within a few dozen feet of the road, an adult female brown bear weighing somewhere between 300 and 400 pounds sat calmly at the forest edge, working through scattered food scraps. Some tourists snapped pictures from behind open car doors. Locals walking by gave the bear plenty of room. A few of them shouted warnings at anyone drifting too close. This is the part of Romania where brown bears have become a roadside fixture. Generations of tourists feeding them from their cars have created animals that tolerate people at a distance, but will absolutely turn violent if you push into their space. It's not a predatory response, it's defensive. But when a bear that size charges from 12 feet away, the distinction doesn't matter much. Milena Kohokaru was a 28-year-old social media coordinator from Bucharest who'd driven up to the Carpathians for a long weekend. Her accounts were full of close-range wildlife selfies from previous trips, mostly deer and foxes across European parks. She'd posted her itinerary ahead of time, promising her followers content with the famous roadside bears. That promise is a detail that sticks with me. She'd already told people what she was going to do before she even got there. The content was committed to before she ever saw the bear. I think that matters more than people realize. Her friend stayed in the car and watched through the windshield. A Romanian man standing nearby yelled at her to stop. Milena waved him off without turning around. Phone held out in front of her in selfie mode, closing the distance to the bear one step at a time. She was smiling. You could see it in the way she held the phone. The animal had been watching her approach, glancing up without retreating. That tolerance is the trap. It looks like the bear is fine with you being there. What it actually means is you haven't crossed the line yet. Habituated bears have a threshold, and they don't always warn you when you're approaching it. They go from sitting still to full violence in a heartbeat, and the switch is proximity. When Milena stepped to within about 12 feet, the line moved. The bear went from stationary to full contact in a single burst. The first swipe hit her across the upper body and knocked her off her feet. The bear followed up with repeated blows from both forepaws and bit at her head and neck. The attack was brief, likely lasting only seconds, before the bear pulled back and walked into the trees. Defensive aggression. She'd made her point and left, but 30 seconds was more than enough. By the time other tourists reached Milena, the damage was obvious. Massive trauma to the head and neck. Paramedics were called, but the winding mountain road meant a long wait. She was unresponsive when the ambulance arrived and did not survive the transport to the hospital. 12 feet. I've measured that out, and it's barely 2 body lengths. She closed to within 12 feet of a wild bear, with her back to it for a selfie. And the bear gave her exactly one warning, which was none at all. Afterward, local officials pushed again for crackdowns on roadside feeding and garbage disposal. The same recommendation they'd made before and would make again. The bear was never pursued. She'd reacted the way any habituated bear would when pushed past its threshold. It was September 4th, 2014, in Bodega Bay, Northern California. The Pacific Ocean off Sonoma County was running cold that morning, sitting at approximately 58 degrees Fahrenheit. Marine Patrol had placed a small buoy line around the carcass the previous afternoon, and informal advisories had been passed to boat operators in the area to stay clear of the zone. Davin Quirk was 29 years old, originally from Ventura County, and had been recreational freediving since his early 20s. He ran a mid-sized YouTube channel built around ocean adventure content, open water swims, spearfishing, and unscripted, encounters. He had no formal marine biology training and no certification in shark behavior or wildlife interaction of any kind. Over the prior year, his channel had grown steadily, and he had developed a habit of framing dangerous stunt ideas as audience choices rather than his own, diffusing personal responsibility while driving engagement. 3 days before the incident, he posted a poll asking whether he should swim toward the shark near the whale carcass. When the majority voted yes, he confirmed that evening he would go through with it. A friend who had driven up refused to enter the water, but agreed to operate the boat and run the surface camera. He had been present for other shoots and understood what Davin's content required. 2 commercial fishermen working the area had reported multiple great white sightings near the carcass the previous afternoon. Davin had spoken to one of them at the dock and posted the conversation as confirmation the shark was still there. He entered the water with a 5mm wetsuit, fins, a mask, and a GoPro on a handheld pole. No cage, no chainmail, no dive knife, no surface oxygen. The boat carried no medical kit beyond a basic first aid box. The great white shark is the largest predatory fish on Earth, with adults commonly reaching 15 to 20 feet and weighing between 1,500 and 4,000 pounds. They are capable of bursts up to 25 miles per hour and respond rapidly to scent and movement in the water. Near an active whale carcass, great whites enter a heightened feeding state driven by blood, decomposition oils, and biological material dispersing through the water column. Anything that moves into that zone becomes subject to investigative or predatory contact regardless of size. A single bite can remove 30 to 50 pounds of tissue, and while they rarely return for a second strike on a human, one bite at the upper leg or torso is sufficient to cause fatal blood loss within minutes. Davin entered the water from the starboard side of the motorboat at approximately 8:22 a.m. His friend remained on deck operating a handheld camera. A single great white, later estimated at 16 to 17 feet based on frame-by-frame comparison with the boat length in recovered footage, had been making slow, wide circles around the carcass at a distance of roughly 25 to 30 feet. Davin swam toward the carcass from the opposite side of the boat at a slow and deliberate pace. Over approximately 4 minutes, he closed the distance between himself and the shark to roughly 15 feet. The shark continued its circular pattern without altering course during that time. At the 4-minute and 40-second mark, the shark broke its circular path and turned inward toward the carcass in a direct line. Davin was positioned between the shark and the whale at that moment. He did not move laterally. The shark did not slow. It struck him at the upper left thigh and hip, displacing him approximately 6 feet sideways in the water. His friend, watching from the deck with the camera still running, reported no audible sound from Davin at the moment of contact. The shark did not return. Davin surfaced face up and was pulled to the swim platform within seconds. The left leg from mid-thigh downward had been removed in a single bite. Hemorrhage was immediate and uncontrolled. His friend wrapped a nylon dry bag strap around the upper thigh as tightly as he could manage. It slowed but did not stop the bleeding. Davin lost consciousness within approximately 90 seconds of being pulled aboard. His friend spent the next 23 minutes on the boat with Davin unconscious, maintaining pressure as best he could with what was available, before a response vessel arrived to find Davin without a detectable pulse. Resuscitation was attempted on the vessel during the return to shore. He was transferred to a medical unit at the harbor, but was pronounced dead shortly after arrival. The official cause of death was exsanguination due to traumatic amputation of the left lower extremity. The rate of blood loss had been too severe for the improvised tourniquet to have any meaningful effect, and the 23-minute response window had been too wide for any intervention to change the outcome. The GoPro footage was collected by marine law enforcement and reviewed by local authorities. It was not released publicly, likely withheld as part of the ongoing investigation or out of respect for the deceased. The friend was interviewed twice and was not charged. The case was ruled an accidental death resulting from voluntary and unsanctioned entry into an active wildlife zone. No charges were filed.
It was the 3rd of August 2016, and the Gulf of Mexico, off the coast of Pensacola, Florida, was sitting under the full weight of a late summer afternoon. The water was warm and flat, the kind of day that makes offshore fishing feel like a casual afternoon rather than an excursion into open water where things are genuinely unpredictable. A charter vessel with 5 teenagers on board had been out for several hours when the situation changed. Zephyr Mallow was 17 years old. He worked part-time cleaning charter boats at a local marina and had developed a modest online following by filming himself and his friends in situations that were designed to look reckless. That was the product he was selling: fearlessness, or at least the convincing performance of it. The content had given him a local reputation, and that reputation had become something he maintained deliberately, even when it pointed directly toward things he should have stopped doing. The group had been fishing when they accidentally hooked a juvenile bull shark. It measured just over 6 feet long, not an adult, but the word juvenile in this context means something specific and should not be misread as small or manageable. Bull sharks are among the most physically powerful shark species relative to their size. They have a short, stocky body plan built for generating force rather than sustained speed. Their jaws are disproportionately wide, and their bite force relative to body size ranks among the highest of any shark species. They do not lose consciousness quickly when removed from the water. I know these animals. They do not become calm or disoriented in a way that reduces their capacity for sudden, explosive movement. They thrash, they re-engage, and when they bite, they hold. The fight to bring the animal to the boat took nearly 40 minutes. At least one person in the group suggested cutting the line before anyone got hurt. Zephyr overruled it. After several failed attempts and a lot of shouting, the group finally dragged the shark over the gunwale and onto the deck, still fully active, still thrashing, scattering tackle and gear in every direction, while the boys shouted and stepped back from the animal's movement. The shark had not worn itself out. That is not how bull sharks work. Zephyr crouched near the animal, while another person held tension on the leader rope. He repositioned himself several times, trying to frame the image, his face close to the shark's head, both of them visible in a single photo. Now, I think many teenagers are being reckless nowadays, especially when it comes to getting footage or selfies and sharing it online. Things like this may look harmless, but you do not know when an animal might snap. He was leaning over the animal's jaws when the shark whipped sideways and bit into the side of his throat and lower jawline. The bleeding was catastrophic. The vessel was offshore. His friends tried to shove the shark back into the water and radio for help simultaneously. Rescue crews intercepted the boat before it reached shore, but Zephyr had already lost too much blood. He died before the vessel reached the marina. Phone footage captured portions of the incident, the shark still active on the deck, Zephyr repositioning near it enough that investigators could piece together the sequence of decisions and what each of them had ignored. Nothing about the shark's behavior that afternoon was outside what bull sharks do. It had been pulled onto a boat, pinned, and surrounded. The thrashing was not a warning. It was the only response the animal had available. The outcome had been assembled one decision at a time, and each of those decisions had been made by a person who understood, at some level, that what he was doing was dangerous, and who had chosen the photograph anyway.
It was August 10th, 2017, when Ivan Priss made a decision that would cost him everything in the pristine wilderness of Glacier National Park, Montana. The 31-year-old freelance travel photographer had been driving through the Rocky Mountains with his 2 closest friends on what was supposed to be a week-long adventure documenting America's most spectacular landscapes. The morning sun cast golden rays across the glacier-carved valleys as their rental car pulled into a roadside meadow where wild berries grew in abundance among the tall grass, creating what appeared to be the perfect natural studio. Ivan's companions, Mark Dalton and Chris Moreno, had grown accustomed to their friend's relentless pursuit of the perfect wildlife shot for his travel blog. Mark, a cautious 33-year-old software engineer, constantly reminded the group about park safety regulations, while Chris, a 30-year-old fitness trainer, was busy recording their entire trip for social media content. The trio had been inseparable since college, but Ivan's competitive nature about capturing viral wildlife photos often pushed boundaries that made his friends uncomfortable. Fresh bear tracks pressed deep into the soft earth near the berry bushes should have been warning enough, but Ivan's thrill-seeking personality drove him forward when other tourists were already retreating to their vehicles. The park's warning signs were clear: maintain at least 100 yards distance from all bears. Rangers had posted these regulations throughout Glacier National Park after decades of dangerous encounters, but Ivan saw only opportunity where others saw risk. The meadow stretched before them like a natural amphitheater, with berry-laden bushes creating the perfect backdrop for what he believed would be his most viral photograph yet. Grizzly bears are among North America's most formidable predators, weighing up to 800 pounds and capable of running 35 miles per hour despite their massive size. These powerful omnivores possess devastating strength, with forelimbs capable of delivering crushing blows. Their bite force is estimated between 975 and 1,160 pounds per square inch, strong enough to crack bone and crush dense tissue with ease. During berry season, grizzlies enter hyperphagia, consuming up to 20,000 calories daily to prepare for winter hibernation. When disturbed during feeding, their defensive instincts can trigger sudden aggressive responses that can prove fatal to humans who venture too close. The large grizzly bear feeding among the bushes had been peacefully foraging when Ivan made his fatal decision. Stepping past the roadside barrier with his phone held outward, he walked directly into the meadow while approaching within 30 to 40 feet of the massive animal. Chris continued recording from the safety of their vehicle, while Mark remained frozen near the car, watching in horror as his friend turned his back to frame the bear behind him in what he hoped would be the perfect selfie. The bear's massive head lifted instantly, its dark eyes locking onto the intruder who had violated its feeding space. Without hesitation, the grizzly charged across the meadow with terrifying speed, its heavy paws thundering against the earth as it closed the distance in seconds. Ivan barely had time to react before the enormous animal collided with him. The bear's powerful forelimbs struck Ivan and knocked him violently to the ground, the impact echoing across the meadow. Before he could react, the grizzly was on top of him, its immense weight pinning him beneath its bulk. The bear lunged downward, biting toward the head and upper back while raking with its claws, a typical defensive mauling response at close range, the force fracturing ribs and tearing deep wounds as Ivan struggled beneath the crushing weight. The mauling did not end instantly. The grizzly continued its defensive assault, biting and clawing while Ivan remained on the ground, the attack lasting long enough for the bear to fully neutralize the threat. Witnesses later described the assault as lasting several long seconds before Ivan stopped moving, after which the bear stayed over him briefly, huffing and pacing in tight circles, a common defensive behavior. Only after the victim lay motionless did the animal slowly back away toward the berry bushes. Park rangers later recovered Ivan's body near the attack site, confirming that massive trauma and severe internal bleeding caused his death within minutes rather than instantly, consistent with injuries seen in close-range grizzly attacks. The investigation revealed that Ivan had violated multiple park safety protocols, approaching far closer than regulations allowed, while the bear was feeding in its natural habitat. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the travel photography community, with many of Ivan's followers expressing disbelief that someone experienced with wildlife could make such a fatal error in judgment. His family requested privacy during their grief, while park officials used the incident to reinforce the importance of maintaining safe distances from wildlife. It was May 27th, 2015, when landscape photographer Kellen Trove pulled his vehicle into a gravel turnout along the Kananaskis Trail in Alberta, Canada. The Rocky Mountain foothills stretched majestically in all directions, their snow-capped peaks creating a dramatic backdrop against the clear spring sky. At 38, Kellen had established himself as a respected nature photographer, known for his patient approach to capturing the perfect interplay of light and landscape. His family had accompanied him on this particular outing, positioning themselves near the vehicle while he scouted for optimal shooting locations. The forest corridor that caught Kellen's attention wound through a mixture mixture of spruce and pine trees, offering glimpses of a rushing creek that promised dramatic photographic opportunities. Recent reports had mentioned increased wildlife activity in the area, including sightings of a habituated cougar that had been displaying unusually bold behavior around human settlements. Cougars, also known as mountain lions, are North America's second-largest wild cats, typically weighing between 130 and 180 pounds and measuring over 8 feet in length. These solitary hunters are perfectly adapted for ambush predation, using their tawny coats to blend seamlessly with forest environments. Their hunting strategy typically focuses on delivering a suffocating bite to the throat, using powerful jaw muscles to compress the windpipe and major blood vessels until the victim loses consciousness. Kellen made his fatal mistake when he decided to follow the narrow game trail alone into the dense tree cover, seeking a clearer angle for his photography. His focus remained fixed on the photographic possibilities ahead, ignoring the increasing signs of predator presence. At 3:47 p.m., he found exactly what he was looking for: the rushing creek visible through a gap in the trees, with dappled sunlight creating the magical lighting he had been seeking all day. The shot was perfect, and he clicked the shutter without hesitation, capturing what would become his final photograph. When investigators later examined the high-resolution file, they discovered something that would send chills through the photography community. Enhanced and enlarged, the image revealed unmistakable golden eyes and a tawny coat lurking in the deep shadows at the edge of the frame. The cougar, already positioned and watching from the dense undergrowth. Kellen had unknowingly photographed his own stalker. The cougar had been tracking human activity from the moment the family arrived at the pullout. The predator had likely been observing from concealment, waiting for an opportunity to investigate the intruders. The attack came without warning just minutes later, as Kellen moved deeper into the forest corridor. His camera, set to continuous shooting mode in anticipation of wildlife encounters, would tell the horrifying story of his final moments. The cougar launched itself from behind with a powerful leap that covered the distance to its target in a single bound. When the camera hit the ground, its continuous mode was automatically triggered, capturing 14 frames of the encounter in a horrifying sequence. The photos showed the cougar's powerful hindquarters as it pinned its victim, then close-ups of fur and claws as the attack unfolded before the lens became obscured by forest debris. The initial strike drove Kellen forward onto the forest floor as the cougar's claws anchored deep into his upper back and shoulders. The cougar's hunting instincts immediately guided it toward the throat bite that would subdue the struggling prey. The cougar's jaws clamped down on the throat, applying crushing pressure to the windpipe and carotid arteries. The sustained compression of the throat caused rapid oxygen deprivation to the brain, while damage to major blood vessels accelerated the process. Kellen's consciousness faded as the relentless pressure continued, his body's struggles gradually subsiding. The last clear image from his camera, time-stamped at 3:52 p.m., showed only the forest floor and scattered pine needles, a mundane final frame that belied the violence occurring just beyond the camera's view. The cougar maintained its suffocating grip, repositioning several times to ensure complete control. When the predator finally sensed human voices approaching from the direction of the vehicle, it released its hold and vanished into the forest cover with startling speed. Emergency responders arrived within the hour, but the severe throat trauma and prolonged asphyxiation had already proven fatal. Kellen's family, who had called out for him and discovered the scene, could only watch helplessly as medical personnel confirmed what they already feared. Officials launched an investigation into the incident, ultimately determining that the attack resulted from a territorial encounter with a habituated cougar. The cat was tracked and destroyed due to its proximity to human settlements and demonstrated lack of fear around people. When investigators recovered Kellen's camera equipment, the sequence of images told a chilling story. From the peaceful creek scene that had unknowingly captured his stalker to the violent final moments of the encounter, Kellen's family established a wilderness photography safety foundation, emphasizing the importance of maintaining awareness of predator presence and avoiding isolated areas during peak activity periods. Deshmund Acharya had been planning this trip for months. The 44-year-old garment exporter from Ahmedabad had spent a small fortune building up a wildlife photography kit, lenses, and bodies that cost more than some of the jeeps in the reserve, and he'd visited tiger reserves across India often enough to believe he understood how they worked. He booked a premium private jeep through the official allocation system at a strictly regulated reserve in Rajasthan's Aravalli foothills, paying significantly above the standard shared safari rate for an exclusive vehicle with a driver and a forest department guide. That kind of money changes how people think about the experience. I've seen it over and over. You're not just a tourist anymore, you're a client. And clients start treating safety rules like suggestions. The reserve operated under India's Forest Department, with checkpoints at every entry gate and a strictly enforced rule against anyone exiting a vehicle inside the boundaries. The driver had gone through the standard briefing at the gate. Staying in the Jeep wasn't just a recommendation, it was the law. No exceptions. It was a warm afternoon on March 14, 2016, when the radio crackled with a sighting report. A tigress was resting in thick grass roughly 80 yards off the road. The driver pulled the Jeep to the designated viewing spot, engine idling. But the grass was tall, and the tigress was barely visible, just the top of her head and her ears above the brush line. Deshmund stood up in the Jeep, braced against the roll bar, and tried for a shot. Nothing usable. He told the driver to move the Jeep off track for a closer angle. The driver refused immediately. So did the guide. Off-road driving was strictly prohibited, and the tigress was too concealed for a safe approach. Witnesses in the second Jeep later described the whole sequence as unfolding in well under a minute. Deshmund climbed onto the side rail. The driver grabbed his arm. The guide warned him directly that stepping onto the ground near a concealed tiger could trigger an ambush. A second Jeep carrying tourists had pulled up roughly 40 yards behind them, and passengers later said they could hear the argument from their vehicle. Here's the thing about tigers in these reserves. They're used to vehicles. A Jeep rolling by is just part of the landscape to them, but a human being on foot at ground level, moving through tall grass, that's something entirely different. That looks like prey. The difference isn't subtle. It's the difference between a rock and a meal. Deshmund pulled free, dropped to the ground, and walked straight toward the grass where the tigress was hiding. The driver hit the horn in short bursts and revved the engine. I keep coming back to that moment. The driver is hitting the horn, revving the engine, the guide is on the radio, and Deshmund is walking away from all of it with his camera up. 3 separate warnings happening at the same time, and he's ignoring everyone. He closed to within roughly 50 feet of the tigress before the grass erupted. She came out of cover at full speed. Bengal tigers can hit 35 miles per hour in short bursts, and at that range, the gap closed before he had time to react. She drove him to the ground and went for the neck, which is typical of tiger attacks. Their canines are over 3 inches long, and a sustained bite to the throat can quickly compromise the airway. The driver kept hitting the horn and revving the engine. The guide radioed forest staff at the nearest post. Another safari jeep arrived shortly after and drove toward the scene, and the engine noise was enough to get the tigress to pull back into deeper cover. Rangers reached Deshmund somewhere between 10 and 20 minutes later. He'd taken a bite to the throat that would have caused rapid airway compromise and severe bleeding. He likely lost consciousness rapidly. He showed no signs of life when responders reached him. Still lying in the grass roughly 50 feet from a jeep he never should have left. The tourists in the second vehicle had seen parts of the Hia incident and were visibly shaken. The reserve shut down safari operations for the rest of the day. The reserve reportedly fitted the tigress with a tracking collar, but didn't destroy her. Her behavior was consistent with a natural defensive response to a human on foot approaching her resting position. The Forest Department ruled the death a direct result of the victim leaving the vehicle against multiple warnings. In the weeks that followed, the reserve added additional signage in Hindi and English and implemented a new policy requiring guides to physically block jeep exits if a passenger attempted to disembark near a sighting. 50 feet. He walked 50 feet from safety into the kill zone of a predator he couldn't even see for a photograph. I've sat with that number for a while now, and it still doesn't make sense to me. It was June 11th, 2017, on the western fringe of Everglades National Park, Florida. The water was dark and tannin-stained, averaging between 3 and 4.5 feet deep, with 0 subsurface visibility. The corridor was marked on regional paddling maps as a restricted seasonal zone, and a posted sign at the western access point made the restriction explicit. Ferris Delry was 34 years old and had been running an outdoor paddling channel for just under 3 years. Originally from Gainesville, he had spent most of his adult life on Florida waterways and knew the park's layout and seasonal patterns better than most. That familiarity had gradually become a liability. His content had shifted from straightforward paddling documentation toward wildlife proximity videos, and he had built part of his audience around publicly framing alligators as overstated threats. The week before the incident, he had posted a video arguing that the seasonal corridor restrictions were excessive and announced he would paddle the restricted corridor during nesting season to prove it. A park ranger encountered him at the western launch site the afternoon before and advised him clearly not to enter, citing the active nesting activity in the corridor and the heightened aggression of females during that period. Ferris acknowledged the warning without argument. He did not dispute it or push back. He simply listened, nodded, and left. He launched before ranger patrols began the following morning at 5:42 a.m. The warning had not changed his plans. It may have only confirmed that the corridor was exactly where he needed to go. He had removed his personal flotation device and clipped it to the rear bungee cord of the kayak. His chest-mounted camera was a waterproof model rated to 30 feet of submersion. The American alligator commonly reaches 11 to 13 feet and 400 to 800 pounds in adulthood. They are ambush predators capable of remaining completely motionless in the water column before striking without warning. Female alligators during nesting season are among the most defensively aggressive animals in North America. The death roll, a rapid full-body spinning motion, is used to disorient and subdue prey, and in shallow, low-visibility water, it can pin a person against the bottom and eliminate any sense of direction within seconds. The death roll is performed while maintaining a powerful bite, using rotational force to disorient, subdue, or tear tissue. Ferris had been in the corridor for approximately 22 minutes when his kayak passed over a submerged nest mound near the left bank, roughly 280 yards from the entry point. The mound was not visible from the surface. A female alligator, later estimated at 9.5 feet based on track measurements and physical evidence recovered at the scene, had been resting motionless in the water column less than 6 feet from the nest. The animal struck the underside of the kayak at 6:04 a.m. The impact was sufficient to capsize the kayak immediately. Ferris entered the water on the left side. The alligator made contact with his left forearm. Within seconds of him hitting the surface, no witnesses were present. The sequence was reconstructed from physical evidence and audio recovered from the chest-mounted camera, which continued recording after the capsize due to its waterproof housing. The audio captured the hull impact, a brief surface disturbance, and then a low-frequency churning consistent with a death roll lasting approximately 8 seconds. After that, only ambient water movement and distant bird calls. The kayak was found drifting 40 yards further down the corridor during a subsequent search of the area. Ferris had not filed a float plan and had not informed anyone of his launch point or intended route. His vehicle was identified at the access lot during a routine check later that morning. A search was initiated shortly after, and his body was recovered submerged in approximately 3.5 feet of water near the left bank of the corridor. The personal flotation device was still attached to the rear of the kayak. Cause of death was listed as drowning. Injuries consistent with alligator contact were documented on the left forearm and upper left shoulder, including deep lacerations and soft tissue compression consistent with a large reptile bite. The chest-mounted camera and its footage were collected by park investigators and reviewed internally. It was not released publicly, likely due to the graphic nature of the audio recording, or retained as part of the investigative record. A park spokesperson confirmed that the restricted zone signage had been in place and that a ranger had spoken to Ferris the previous day.
It was the 27th of February 2018, and the roadside animal attraction outside a regional town in Thailand was running a rotation system. Tourists moved through a sequence of supervised photo areas, handlers circulated, and the captive tigers rested in open-air holding sections between sessions. The facility was not affiliated with any conservation organization or any formal tourism regulatory body. It operated on volume and access. and the access it offered was the product: proximity to adult big cats that few legitimate operations would allow. Naira Velez was 28 years old and worked as a brand strategist based in Tacoma, Washington. She had become increasingly focused on wildlife encounter content over the previous year, unusual animal photographs from countries with fewer restrictions on tourist access, the kind of images that were difficult to get in contexts that were properly supervised. She had traveled to Thailand specifically to find those experiences, and this facility was on that list. The standard protocol at the attraction required tourists to stay behind a low barrier while handlers managed the interaction. The barriers were not particularly substantial, they were crowd management infrastructure, not containment. Naira had been through the supervised area and was unsatisfied with the photographs she had gotten, while workers were occupied with a rushed transfer of another animal between enclosures on the far side of the property. She moved through a partially open side gate and entered a shaded holding section where an adult Bengal tiger was resting without a handler present. Bengal tigers are among the largest cat species in the world. Adult males weigh between 400 and 570 pounds, with a shoulder height of close to 4 feet and a total length, including the tail, of between 9 and 10.5 feet. The behavioral indicators of escalating agitation in a captive tiger are well documented. Increased vigilance, a shift in body posture, repeated focus on a specific target, rigid stillness before movement. These escalate along a recognizable sequence before an attack, and they are visible to anyone watching the animal rather than the camera. The tiger in the holding section had already been through a full rotation of tourist sessions that morning. It had been handled, approached, and photographed by strangers for several hours before it was moved into the holding section to rest. It was not resting easily. Its movement in the enclosure had the quality of an animal that had not had enough time away from stimulation and had not fully settled. Naira entered the section and moved toward the animal to get a closer shot. When the tiger shifted position and she interpreted the movement as it settling, she crouched down beside it, getting low, closing the remaining distance, reducing her own profile in a way that may have registered to the animal as a threat posture rather than a retreat. She was close enough that a sudden movement from either of them would have put her inside the animal's immediate response range. That moment, stepping through a half-open gate into a restricted holding space, is where things stop being bad luck and start being a clear decision. No photo, no just one better shot, and no curiosity is worth crossing into an unsecured predator area, especially when it's already obvious the system isn't properly controlling either the animal or the people around it. What triggered the attack was not extended proximity alone. It was the combination: a stressed animal, an unfamiliar person who had entered its resting space without a handler present, crouching at close range in a way the tiger had no framework to interpret as safe. The animal struck fast. Tourists on the other side of the barrier heard the sound before they understood what they were hearing. Staff reached the section and were able to drive the tiger back, but the time it took to get inside and respond was not measured in minutes, it was measured in seconds, the wrong direction. Naira was transported to a regional hospital. She did not survive. Authorities shut the facility down during the investigation. The tiger's behavior in the sequence leading up to the attack had followed a recognizable escalation, the kind that experienced handlers are trained to interrupt well before it reaches a terminal point. There had been no experienced handler present. There had been no one in the enclosure who knew what they were looking at until it was already over.
It was June 11th, 2018, when Karen Trask made a decision that would prove fatal along the muddy banks of the Luangwa River in Zambia, where murky waters concealed one of Africa's most dangerous animals. The 38-year-old travel blogger had built a successful online following documenting wildlife encounters across the continent, always pushing boundaries to capture dramatic photographs that kept her audience engaged. She was traveling with a wildlife photography tour group led by experienced safari guide Samuel Briggs, who had spent over 15 years navigating the treacherous waters of the Luangwa Valley. The group had been following the meandering river for hours, searching for perfect shots of hippos and crocodiles that called these wetlands home. Karen's determination to capture rare wildlife photos had earned her recognition in travel photography circles, but it also drove her to take risks that more cautious photographers avoided. The Luangwa River stretched before them like a brown ribbon, cutting through lush landscape. its banks lined with thick reeds and patches of sticky mud. Samuel had repeatedly warned the group that hippos were territorial animals responsible for more human deaths in Africa than any other large mammal, explaining that these deceptively docile-looking creatures became extremely aggressive when humans ventured too close to their aquatic domain. Several hippos were visible surfacing near the shoreline, their massive heads breaking the water's surface as they monitored the approaching humans with growing suspicion. The guide's warnings about maintaining safe distances seemed to fall on deaf ears as Karen focused intently on the photographic opportunities before her. Hippopotamuses are among Africa's most lethal animals, with adult bulls weighing up to 4,000 pounds and possessing one of the most powerful bite forces in the animal kingdom at around 1,800 pounds per square inch. These massive semi-aquatic mammals can run up to 30 miles per hour on land despite their bulky appearance, and their enormous jaws contain razor-sharp canine teeth that can reach 12 to 20 inches in total length, including the root, with the visible portion typically around 10 to 12 inches. Hippos are fiercely territorial, especially around water sources, and will attack anything they perceive as a threat. Their massive mouths can open to roughly 150 degrees, creating a gaping maw capable of crushing bone with devastating force. Karen stepped onto the muddy bank while holding her phone outward, positioning herself for what she believed would be the perfect riverside selfie. The wet clay squelched beneath her feet as she moved closer to the water's edge, where a large hippo had surfaced approximately 30 feet away. Samuel called out warnings from higher ground, but Karen remained focused on adjusting her camera angle to capture the massive animal in the background. The water near the bank suddenly churned as the hippo shifted in the shallows, its broad back briefly visible just beneath the surface. Instead of gliding slowly, the massive animal remained mostly submerged, watching the intruder from only a short distance away. Karen continued standing at the water's edge, completely absorbed in framing the perfect photograph, while the territorial giant assessed the human presence that had entered its domain. Without warning, the hippo burst from the shallow water with explosive force, its massive body surging onto the muddy bank as water cascaded from its enormous frame. The territorial bull charged several heavy strides toward Karen, its mouth opening wide to reveal the terrifying expanse of its cavernous jaws lined with thick ivory tusks. Karen had no time to react before the hippo's massive head struck her with devastating force. The hippo's enormous jaws slammed into Karen's torso in a crushing bite, the impact instantly fracturing multiple ribs and causing catastrophic internal injuries. The animal's powerful tusks tore through flesh and bone as the incredible bite pressure compressed her chest cavity beyond survivable limits. Instead of holding her like a predator, the hippo jerked its head upward and violently tossed her body aside, the brutal motion inflicting massive trauma before she collapsed onto the muddy riverbank. The territorial giant snorted loudly and swung its massive head once more, as if ensuring the threat had been neutralized, before turning and retreating back toward the water. Within seconds, the enormous animal disappeared again into the murky shallows, where the rest of the pod remained nearby. Samuel and other guides immediately pulled Karen's body away from the shoreline, but the massive trauma inflicted by the hippo's crushing bite had caused death within moments of the attack. Emergency responders later confirmed that severe thoracic trauma and catastrophic internal bleeding had made survival impossible from the moment of the impact. The investigation revealed that Karen had violated basic safety protocols by approaching too close to the water's edge, where territorial hippos were active. Zambian wildlife authorities used the incident to reinforce education about hippo dangers, emphasizing that these animals kill more people in Africa than many other large predators. Karen's tragic death sent shockwaves through the travel blogging community, with many followers expressing disbelief that such an experienced wildlife photographer could fall victim to what appeared to be a docile animal. Her family requested privacy during their grief, while supporting efforts to educate travelers about the hidden dangers of Africa's waterways. It was March 4th, 2018, when maintenance supervisor Judson Pike entered the service corridors of a privately owned wildlife sanctuary in South Africa's Limpopo province. The facility sprawled across several acres of bushveld terrain, housing rescued big cats in large enclosures designed to mimic their natural habitat. At 41, Judson had worked at the sanctuary for over 6 years, combining his electrical training with hands-on experience in wildlife facility maintenance. His routine-driven approach and familiarity with daily procedures had made him indispensable to the understaffed operation. That afternoon, he was responding to yet another false alarm from a perimeter sensor that had been malfunctioning for weeks. African lions are apex predators capable of generating bite forces exceeding 650 pounds per square inch, with powerful jaws designed to crush bone and sever spinal cords. Adult males can weigh up to 420 pounds and measure over 8 feet in length. Judson made his fatal mistake through a cascading series of errors that afternoon. When Judson received clearance to enter the buffer corridor for routine sensor repair, neither he nor the control room operator realized a critical error had occurred during the morning's enclosure rotations. The lion, a 380-pound male named Tao, should have been secured in his primary night enclosure while maintenance accessed the buffer zone. However, a miscommunication between morning shift workers and afternoon staff resulted in Tao being left in his secondary holding area, which shared the same buffer corridor Judson was authorized to enter. The control room's monitoring system displayed outdated enclosure status information due to a software glitch that had gone unreported for days. When Judson entered the corridor, he checked the clipboard mounted near the access door. Following routine protocol, he pulled out his phone to document the faulty sensor for the maintenance log, snapping a photo that showed the problematic mechanism in detail. Unbeknownst to Judson, his documentation photo had inadvertently captured something far more sinister in the background. Through the chain link fencing visible in the corner of the frame, the golden form of Tao could be seen lying in what should have been his secured night enclosure. The timestamp would later prove crucial in establishing that the lion was already in the wrong location when Judson entered the corridor. Tao had been resting in the shadowed corner of his holding area when the corridor door opened. The enclosed space, barely 15 feet wide and stretching 40 feet in length, provided no escape routes. The lion's territorial response engaged immediately as it detected an intruder in what it perceived as its domain. The attack came with devastating speed. Judson had taken perhaps a dozen steps down the corridor, phone still in hand, when Tao launched from the shadows. The security cameras captured every horrifying detail. At 2:17 p.m., just 3 minutes after his documentation photo, the grainy black and white footage showed him walking confidently down the corridor, completely unaware of the massive predator watching from just meters away. The lion covered the distance in 3 explosive strides, its massive weight colliding with Judson from behind and driving him face down onto the concrete floor. The lion's jaws clamped down on the back of Judson's neck and shoulders in a crushing bite that severed critical blood vessels and damaged the cervical spine. Tao's canines penetrated deep into tissue, tearing through muscle and crushing vertebrae as the predator shook its head violently. Judson likely lost consciousness within seconds from the combination of head trauma, blood loss, and spinal damage. The lion continued its assault for several minutes, driven by predatory instinct. The attack was discovered when the control room operator, noticing the discrepancy in enclosure status logs, attempted to radio Judson for confirmation. When he failed to respond, an emergency protocol was initiated. Staff members found Tao standing over Judson's motionless body through the corridor's observation window. The emergency response team used compressed air blasts and barrier boards to drive the lion back into his primary enclosure. Paramedics pronounced Judson dead at the scene. The catastrophic injuries to his neck, skull, and torso had resulted in death within minutes of the initial attack. Provincial authorities launched a comprehensive investigation into the facility's safety protocols. The sanctuary faced immediate closure pending complete operational overhaul. Judson's final photograph became key evidence in the investigation, its timestamp and background details helping investigators piece together the sequence of failures that led to the tragedy. Judson's family filed wrongful death claims against the facility, citing negligent procedures and inadequate safety measures. For 2 weeks leading up to January 9th, 2014, something had been killing livestock at farms near a small village in the buffer zone south of Chitwan National Park. Goats mostly. The kills were clean and consistent, and the pug marks found along a footpath between the village and a neighboring settlement belonged to a male leopard. Wildlife authorities issued a nighttime curfew. Nobody in, nobody out after sunset. The footpath was considered especially dangerous. Villagers who normally walked between the two settlements after dinner stopped doing so entirely. Farmers brought their livestock inside earlier. The village felt different after dark, quieter, tighter. Everyone knew what was out there. Leopards are built for exactly this kind of hunting. They weigh between 65 and 175 pounds depending on the individual, but pound for pound, they're one of the most dangerous predators on the planet. They hunt almost entirely at night, and their method is ambush. They come from behind or from above with no warning sound at all. By the time you know a leopard is there, it's already on you. In the Chitwan buffer zone, attacks on humans have been documented, particularly during nighttime hours. Dipesh Tamang, a 34-year-old trekking guide from Kathmandu, had been staying at a small guest house in the village for 3 days as part of a walking tour of the lowlands. He'd been to Chitwan twice before and figured he knew the area well enough. The guest house owner, a 60-year-old woman who had lived in the village her entire life, had explained the curfew to him clearly on his first night. The livestock kills, the pug marks, the wildlife authorities' warning. She'd told him the footpath to the next village was off limits after dark. She told him twice. She told him, "That's what gets me." Not a sign, not a pamphlet. A person, face to face, explaining to him exactly what was out there and exactly why he shouldn't go. And he heard her and decided it didn't apply to him. On his third evening, Dipesh told her he was walking the footpath to meet a contact in the next village who could arrange a canoe trip for the following morning. She told him to wait until sunrise. He said the animals avoid humans, grabbed a small flashlight from his bag, and left around 7:30 p.m. The guest house owner watched him walk out the door and down the road toward the tree line. She didn't follow him. What else could she do? She left the front light on and sat down at the kitchen table to wait. The path ran about 1.5 miles through farmland and patches of dense sal forest. Some sections were under full canopy where no moonlight reached the ground. In those stretches, the flashlight beam was the only light for hundreds of yards in any direction. A small cone of white surrounded by absolute darkness on every side. The village and safety were behind him. Ahead was a mile of darkness on a trail that the leopard responsible for the livestock kills was using as a hunting route. Dipesh never made it to the next village. Wildlife officers reconstructed the scene the following morning after the guest house owner reported him missing. His flashlight was found on the path, still switched on, about 1/2 mile from the guest house. The pug marks at the site matched the same leopard that had been killing livestock. The physical evidence suggested a clear sequence. The leopard came from behind and slightly above, probably launching from a raised tree root or low embankment along the trail. First contact was the neck and the back of the head. Drag marks led a short distance off the path into thick undergrowth. Death was likely very quick. Throat bite, suffocation. The flashlight still being on is the detail that won't leave me. It was just sitting there on the trail, beam pointing into the trees. He didn't even get the chance to drop it. 1 second he was walking, and the next second it was over. They found his remains in the undergrowth by midday. The leopard was captured in a cage trap a few days later and removed from the area. Wildlife authorities classified its behavior as natural predation on a human who'd entered its active hunting territory at night. That's not a rogue animal. That's an animal doing what it does, in its own territory, in the dark, to a person who'd been warned not to be there. It was February 3rd, 2017, at a small roadside animal park on the outskirts of Bemidji, Minnesota. The temperature that morning was 9 degrees Fahrenheit, with a wind chill near -4 degrees Fahrenheit and a flat gray sky. The facility had been operating for over 2 decades on a state-issued exhibitor permit, housing a small collection of cold climate animals in outdoor enclosures arranged along a gravel loop. Ren Maki was 26 years old, originally from Duluth, and had been running a small wildlife and travel channel for about 1.5 years. His content ranged from straightforward nature documentation to stunts. He had no animal handling experience of any kind. He had visited the facility once before and had noticed the damaged fencing along the east side of the polar bear enclosure on that visit. The night before the incident, he texted a friend his plan: squeeze through the gap while the bears were in the den, get a photograph, and leave before staff noticed. He believed the cold would keep the bears inactive. The polar bear enclosure was a concrete and chain-link yard measuring approximately 50 by 70 feet, with a shallow pool at one end and a concrete den at the other. A section of chain link along the east side had separated from the lower support rail over the winter, leaving a gap approximately 18 inches wide at ground level. The female bear was inside the den. The male, approximately 11 years old and weighing 940 pounds, was resting in the far corner of the yard, partially hidden by the den wall from Wren's approach angle. One staff member was on duty inside the visitor building near the entrance, with no line of sight to the east side of the enclosure. The polar bear is the largest land carnivore on Earth, with adult males commonly weighing between 775 and 1,300 pounds and capable of running at speeds up to 25 miles per hour. Unlike brown or black bears, polar bears are obligate carnivores and do not display the same range of avoidance or bluff behaviors that other bear species sometimes exhibit toward humans. Cold weather does not reduce their activity level or alertness, and their sense of smell is among the most acute of any land mammal, capable of detecting scent across distances of up to 20 miles under favorable wind conditions. Wren arrived at opening time, paid the entry fee, and walked directly to the polar bear enclosure without stopping at any other exhibit. He squeezed through the gap at approximately 9:14 a.m., stood upright inside the yard, and took several steps toward the center. The male bear was resting 28 feet away around the corner of the den wall, out of Wren's line of sight. The wind that morning was moving from the east, directly from Wren's position toward the den. The bear rose within seconds. It came around the corner of the den wall at a walk that shifted to a full charge within 3 strides, covering the distance in under 2 seconds. Wren had no time to reach the fence gap. The bear struck him on the left side of the head with its right forepaw in a single downward arc, driving him into the frozen ground. He did not move after impact. The bear then bit the back of Wren's head and neck, shook him once, and released. It remained within approximately 10 feet of Wren for several minutes before moving towards the pool at the far end of the enclosure. This pattern of disengagement after an initial strike and bite has been observed in captive polar bear incidents, where the subject ceases all movement immediately after contact. A visitor who had arrived shortly after Wren and was walking the perimeter path came around to the east, sighed at approximately 9:19 a.m. and saw the bear near a figure on the ground. The visitor ran to the main building and alerted the staff member on duty. The staff member used a bucket of fish to draw the bear toward the den entrance, secured the den door, and entered the yard. Wren had no pulse. Emergency services were called at 9:20 a.m. and arrived at 9:41 a.m. A 21-minute response time consistent with rural emergency dispatch in that region during winter conditions. Paramedics documented a depressed fracture of the left temporal bone, deep lacerations to the posterior scalp and upper neck consistent with large canine penetration and soft tissue damage to the cervical region. Wren was pronounced dead at the scene. The official cause of death was traumatic brain injury due to blunt force cranial impact with secondary animal mauling. The facility was issued a conditional closure order following an inspection the following week, citing the damaged fence section as a primary safety deficiency. It did not reopen the following season, and its permit was not renewed. The male bear was transferred to a larger facility in the state. No charges were filed. The case was closed as an accidental death resulting from unauthorized enclosure entry at a private animal exhibit.
It was the 11th of November 2014, and the canyon trails outside Boulder, Colorado were sitting in the cold gray of a pre-dawn November morning. The temperature was below freezing. The trail was a roadside route that Sorrel had used enough times that she ran it in the dark without thinking about the dark familiar enough that it had stopped registering as an environment that required active evaluation and had become instead something closer to a commute. That fall had been a difficult season for wildlife in in the area. A prolonged dry stretch through the summer had compressed the deer population into lower elevations, pulling predators closer to residential and recreational corridors than wildlife managers typically saw. Authorities had documented several daytime sightings of a young male mountain lion, likely a recent disperser, probably between 1 and 2 years old, still establishing a territory in the canyon system that included the trail Sorel ran. The sightings had been reported. A notice had gone out to residents. Sorel was aware of it. Sorel Evans was 26 years old and worked as a cardiac nurse. She was slight, 5'3", under 130 pounds, and ran alone in the dark on routes that followed a consistent schedule, at a pace that put her in the same sections of trail, at roughly the same time, on the same days of the week. Endurance running had become the organizing activity of her off hours, and the trail documentation she built around it had grown into a consistent online presence. She was disciplined in her professional life and increasingly committed to pushing the limits of both distance and terrain in her personal one. People who knew her described her as someone who did not respond well to being told she was doing something that carried risk. She had heard the warnings about the lion sightings. She had continued running the route anyway. That decision to treat a documented predator warning as background noise to routine is where normal familiarity crosses into avoidable exposure to a risk that had already been clearly signaled. Mountain lions do not hunt the way people who have not encountered them tend to imagine. They are ambush predators. They do not typically follow a moving target at length. Instead, they use terrain and cover to position themselves ahead of or adjacent to a moving target, remaining still in concealment until the distance has closed to the point where a short, explosive burst can close the remaining gap before the prey has time to react. Young, dispersing males operating in unfamiliar terrain and with incomplete hunting experience are documented to show bolder behavior toward humans than established adults, not aggression in the territorial sense, but a reduced threshold for treating a smaller moving target as prey. From what I know, a slight person running alone at night on a predictable route through canyon terrain with dense brush cover on both sides represents exactly the profile that fits within a young lion's prey recognition parameters. Sorel stopped partway through her run to document her progress. A brief pause, a phone raised. The lion had positioned itself in the brush adjacent to the trail at some point before she reached that section, using the canyon terrain the way canyon terrain is built to be used, by something that does not want to be seen until it decides to move. The attack came within minutes of her stopping. Evidence at the scene indicated she had detected movement behind her and attempted to run toward the roadway. A young lion in unfamiliar territory does not break off that kind of pursuit. It overtook her on the trail. Passing drivers noticed signs of disturbance in the early morning light and called authorities. Her body was found farther off the path. The mountain lion had used the terrain the way the terrain was built for cover, concealment, and a target moving predictably through a fixed route in the dark. A young, dispersing male in a drought year, in a canyon corridor where deer had been pushed lower and lion sightings had already been documented in the pre-dawn hours, with a small, isolated runner on a predictable schedule, none of those variables had to be in place for the run to feel normal. All of them were. The person running through those conditions had weighed them against the value she placed on continuing and had decided the run was worth it.
It was November 9th, 2017, when Zebby Dwalt made a decision that would prove fatal during an early morning jeep safari in Ranthambore National Park, India, where the world's most magnificent predator roamed freely through ancient forests that had witnessed countless hunts over millennia. The 34-year-old warehouse supervisor from Detroit had traveled to India with his closest friends, Laura Chen, a 32-year-old nurse, and Matt Rivera, a 36-year-old construction foreman, on what was supposed to be the adventure of a lifetime, exploring one of the world's premier tiger reserves. The trio had arrived in Ranthambore during peak tiger season, when the dry winter months forced these elusive cats to venture closer to water sources and dirt tracks that crisscrossed the 392 square kilometer national park. Zebby's impulsive and adventurous personality had driven him to book this expensive safari after seeing viral videos of tiger encounters on social media, and he was determined to capture his own dramatic footage that would impress impress his followers back home. The early morning air was crisp as their open-top safari jeep bounced along the dusty track, with their experienced guide explaining that tigers sometimes rested near these paths during their dawn hunting patrols. The guide had briefed the group about safety protocols before entering the park, emphasizing that tigers were apex predators capable of incredible speed and power, and that visitors must remain seated in the vehicle at all times. Ranthambore's tigers had grown somewhat accustomed to safari vehicles over the decades, but they remained wild predators whose behavior could never be predicted or controlled. The morning sun filtered through the dock trees and scattered bamboo groves, creating the perfect lighting conditions for wildlife photography as their jeep navigated the network of dirt roads carved through the forest. Laura and Matt remained seated in the jeep with their cameras ready, but Zebi's competitive nature and desire for the perfect shot began to override his common sense as they approached an area where fresh tiger tracks were visible in the dust. The guide pointed out paw prints and scratch marks on nearby trees, indicating that a large male tiger had passed through the area not long before. Bengal tigers are apex predators, with adult males sometimes weighing over 500 pounds and measuring close to 10 feet in length, including the tail. Their strength allows them to bring down animals much larger than themselves, and they can reach speeds of around 35 miles per hour in short bursts. Their jaws and canine teeth are designed to grip the throat or neck of prey, while their forelimbs are powerful enough to knock large animals off their feet with a single strike. The jeep slowed along a narrow dirt track where a Bengal tiger was lying partially concealed in low brush no more than 15 yards from the road, its striped coat blending into the dry grass and shadow. The animal appeared relaxed but alert, watching the vehicle without moving as the guide quietly told everyone to remain still. Zebi stood upright in the open jeep while holding his phone outward, trying to frame the tiger in the background. The guide immediately told him to sit down, warning that sudden movement could provoke the animal, but Zebi leaned farther over the side rail to get a clearer shot. The movement drew the tiger's attention. Its head lifted, ears turning forward as it focused on the one figure no longer seated with the rest of the group. For several seconds, the animal remained still, muscles tense beneath its striped coat as it watched Zebi shift his weight outside the vehicle. Without any loud roar or warning, the tiger suddenly surged forward from the brush, covering the short distance in a powerful burst of speed. The leap was directed toward the side of the jeep, where Zebi was leaning out, the predator reacting to the closest moving target. The tiger's front paws struck the side of the vehicle and caught Zebi across the upper body, pulling him off balance and dragging him down from the open seat onto the dirt beside the track. Before he could recover, the animal was on top of him, its weight pinning him to the ground as the others shouted in panic. The tiger clamped its jaws around the side of his neck and throat, the typical killing bite used on large prey. The pressure crushed the airway and damaged major blood vessels, and the force of the impact against the ground caused severe trauma to the upper spine. Zebi stopped moving within seconds, the attack following the same instinctive pattern tigers use when subduing animals in the wild. The driver immediately accelerated the jeep forward, while the guide shouted and struck the metal frame to make noise. The sudden movement and shouting caused the tiger to release its grip and back away, retreating into the brush a few yards from the road while still watching the group. Laura and Matt screamed for help as Zebi lay motionless on the dirt track, his injuries clearly catastrophic. The guide radioed park authorities, but they were deep inside the reserve, and it took several minutes before another patrol vehicle arrived to assist them. Rangers reached the scene and confirmed that the injuries to the neck and spine were fatal, with massive blood loss and airway damage leaving no chance of survival. The area was secured while the remaining tourists were escorted out of the zone, the tiger disappearing back into the forest as quickly as it had appeared. The incident became a harsh reminder to safari operators and visitors alike that even in parks where animals are used to vehicles, the predators remain completely wild. Standing up or leaning outside the jeep removes the only barrier between human and hunter. And in rare moments like this, instinct can take over in an instant. Zebi Dwalt's fatal mistake showed how quickly a controlled wildlife encounter can turn into a deadly situation when basic safety rules are ignored, proving that in places like Ranthambore, the distance between fascination and danger can be only a few feet. It was October 19th, 2017, when travel blogger Vera Krag made the decision to take a shoreline shortcut through Brazil's Pantanal wetlands in Mato Grosso. The vast floodplains stretched endlessly in all directions, creating one of the world's largest tropical wetland areas, where countless waterways meandered through dense vegetation. At 33, Vara had built a following documenting remote eco-routes throughout South America, specializing in off-the-beaten-path destinations that mainstream tourism had yet to discover. Her companion that day was a 45-year-old local boat operator who had navigated these waters for decades and understood the seasonal patterns that governed wildlife movement. The decision to leave the boat and walk the riverbank was driven by time constraints and the promise of reaching a scenic river bend before sunset. The exposed banks showed clear evidence of recent wildlife activity, with fresh tracks pressed into the soft mud, revealing the presence of large predators. Jaguars are the America's most powerful big cats, possessing the strongest bite force of any feline species at over 1,500 pounds per square inch. These apex predators can weigh up to 250 pounds and measure over 6 feet in length, with muscular builds optimized for crushing bone and penetrating thick hides. These solitary hunters are perfectly adapted for wetland environments, being excellent swimmers and capable of taking prey both in water and on land. Vara made her fatal mistake when she chose to walk along the water's edge at dusk, the prime hunting time for jaguars. Her focus remained on reaching the destination quickly, but she couldn't resist stopping for what would become her final social media post. At 4:42 p.m., she positioned her phone to capture her muddy hiking boots at the water's edge. Focused on composing the perfect shot, she failed to notice the large paw print visible in the mud just inches from her left boot, a fresh jaguar track that followers would later point out in the comments, not knowing they were looking at evidence of the predator that was already stalking her. The jaguar had been stalking silently through the riverside vegetation, using the natural cover to approach undetected. These predators are known for their patience and ability to remain motionless for extended periods before striking. The attack came with explosive suddenness from the dense vegetation along the bank. Just 23 minutes after her final Instagram post, the jaguar launched itself in a short, powerful burst that covered the distance to its target in a fraction of a second. Vara's camera, still in her hands from documenting the journey, captured one final terrifying image in the split second before impact, a blur of spotted fur and gleaming fangs as the jaguar erupted from the vegetation. The timestamp read 5:05 p.m., marking the exact moment when adventure travel turned into a fatal encounter with one of nature's most efficient killers. The initial impact drove Vara to the ground as the jaguar's powerful forelimbs secured its grip. The predator's massive weight and momentum made resistance impossible, while its claws tore through the victim's clothing and deep into flesh. The jaguar's attack focused on the neck and shoulder region with devastating effectiveness. The predator's canine teeth, measuring up to 2 inches in length, penetrated repeatedly into vital areas as the powerful jaws clamped down with crushing force. The combination of deep puncture wounds, crushing pressure, and rapid blood loss led to shock and loss of consciousness within moments. The attack continued for less than a minute before Vara's movements ceased entirely. Death occurred rapidly from the combination of blood loss, tissue damage, and potentially cervical injury from the violent shaking and crushing force. Shouting erupted from the direction of the boat as Vara's companion realized what was happening. The jaguar immediately released its grip and bounded back into the dense vegetation, disappearing within seconds. The boat operator reached Vara within moments, but the extensive injuries made survival impossible. When investigators later examined Vara's camera and phone, they found the chilling progression from her confident Instagram post to the final blurred image that would never be shared. A stark reminder of how quickly confidence could turn to catastrophe in the wilderness. Local authorities launched an investigation into the incident, working with wildlife officials to understand the circumstances. The jaguar was not pursued, as officials determined it had acted according to natural predatory instincts when humans entered its territory during prime hunting hours. Vara's family established a wildlife awareness foundation focusing on the importance of respecting predator territories and understanding animal behavior in remote locations. The fire pit at the center of the boma was burning low. It was July 24th, 2018, at a small safari lodge in Zimbabwe's Matabeleland South Province, one of those places where the concession borders unfenced wilderness, and the bush just starts right outside the cleared perimeter. You could hear hyenas calling in the distance most nights. Winter nights in that part of the country drop into the low 40s, and most of the guests had gathered around the fire after dinner. A couple from the UK, a solo traveler from Cape Town, and Whitfield holding court. Garamond Whitfield was on his 4th or 5th glass of wine. The 56-year-old retired insurance executive from Johannesburg had booked a 5-night photographic safari at the lodge, and he'd spent most of his stay letting the staff know how familiar he was with the African bush. Grew up in it, he kept saying. Knew the wildlife. Didn't need anyone looking after him. Other guests at the boma that evening would later describe him as loud, friendly, and visibly drunk. The lodge had a strict rule. After dark, any guest moving between their cabin and the main lodge needed an armed escort. It wasn't a complicated arrangement. You'd radio the front desk, a ranger would walk over with a rifle and a flashlight, and he'd walk you to your door and wait until you were inside. The whole thing took maybe 5 minutes. The rule was explained at check-in, printed on cards in each cabin, and repeated by staff every evening. Whitfield's cabin was about 200 yards from the boma, along an unpaved path that passed through scattered mopane scrub. 200 yards. Maybe a 2-minute walk. 200 yards. I keep turning that number over. Less than 2 football fields. A walk so short you wouldn't think twice about it at home. But this wasn't home. This was unfenced lion country in the middle of the night. Around 10:30, Whitfield said he was heading to bed. A staff member offered to call the armed escort. Whitfield waved him off. The staff member pushed. Lions had been heard calling from less than a mile away earlier that evening. Whitfield laughed, said he didn't need a babysitter, and walked out into the dark. The pathway lights ran out about 30 yards past the boma. After that, the trail was pitch black, with mopane scrub pressing in on both sides at head height. No moon that night. The kind of darkness where you can't see your own feet. Here's the thing about lions at night. Their eyes are significantly more sensitive in low light than ours. A person stumbling down a dark path can't see 10 feet ahead. A lion sitting in that same scrub can see everything. And when individual lions or small groups are moving through their territory after dark, they investigate sounds and movement. It's not always a coordinated hunt. Sometimes it's just curiosity with 400 pounds of muscle behind it. A charge from close range covers the distance faster than any human can react in the dark, and the kill typically comes from a suffocating grip to the throat. He laughed. I keep getting stuck on that. The staff member told him there were lions out there, and he laughed. Not defiance, not frustration. He genuinely thought it was funny, and then he walked into the dark. The scene reconstruction filled in the rest as best it could. Whitfield made it about 150 yards down the path before the encounter. Track patterns in the sandy soil suggested more than one lion, likely a female and a younger animal, moving through the concession along a route that happened to cross the cabin trail. Evidence suggested the attack came from the scrub beside the path. Fast, from the side. He went down and never got back up. The bite went to the throat, a sustained hold that cut off his air. Little evidence of a prolonged struggle. His wine glass was found nearby, intact in the sand. The glass didn't break. He's gone, and the glass is just sitting there in the sand, without a crack on it. That image is the one I can't put down. Something about the glass surviving what he didn't just crystallizes the whole thing for me. A staff member heard a disturbance from the direction of the cabins and raised the alarm immediately. The armed escort team got there as fast as they could, rifles and spotlights cutting through the scrub. The lions had already pulled back into the bush. Whitfield was on the path with injuries consistent with a fatal throat bite that would have quickly cut off his airway. The whole thing was likely over very quickly. The other guests at the boma that night were escorted back to their cabins under armed guard, most of them in silence. The lodge cooperated fully with the inquiry. Their protocols were documented, the staff members' attempt to stop Whitfield was corroborated, and the lodge was cleared. The lions were left alone. They'd been moving through their own territory at night and encountered an unescorted person walking through the scrub. That isn't unusual behavior for a lion moving through its territory at night. The thing I keep sitting with after all of these is how simple survival would have been. Stay in the Jeep, set up the tripwire, don't get in the water, stay behind the car door, wait until morning, take the 2-minute escort. None of it was complicated, none of it was expensive, and none of it was done. It was August 19th, 2018, at a small, privately permitted big cat facility on rural property outside Statesboro, Georgia. The facility housed several exotic cats in individual chain-link enclosures arranged along a gravel path on approximately 12 acres of pine flatwoods. It ran an informal paid tour program that had been operating for several years without major incident. Rael Fenwick was 27 years old and from Savannah. He had been running an outdoor and wildlife channel for about 18 months, built around visits to small exotic animal facilities, roadside zoos, and private collections across the Southeast. His content had a consistent pattern. Each visit pushed slightly further than the last. He had reached through fencing at 2 other facilities in the months prior, touching animals without incident both times, and had posted those clips framing the lack of consequence as proof that the risks were overstated. He had no animal handling background of any kind. He had been building toward the stunt for weeks. His last 3 videos at exotic animal facilities had each pushed closer to direct contact, and the leopard feeding interruption was the next logical step in that progression. The facility's tour guide had given a verbal briefing at the start of the visit, prohibiting contact with any enclosure fencing, and had reminded Rael of the rules at 2 earlier enclosures after observing him moving too close. When the group reached the leopard enclosure, the guide moved ahead with the rest of the tour, leaving Rael momentarily alone at the fence. The leopard typically weighs between 66 and 176 pounds, but is pound for pound among the strongest of the large cats, capable of carrying prey heavier than itself vertically into trees. Their bite force is estimated at approximately 310 pounds per square inch. Leopards are among the most food-possessive of the large cats. Interrupting one mid-meal is one of the most reliably dangerous things a person can do in proximity to one. When a leopard seizes prey by the neck, it applies a sustained compressive bite, targeting the cervical vertebrae, and the lateral shaking motion that follows is a kill mechanism designed to sever or displace the spinal cord. Captive leopards retain this instinct fully, regardless of their exposure to humans. The resident leopard was a 7-year-old female that had been at the facility since she was 2 years old. She weighed approximately 112 pounds, had a documented history of fence-directed charging at unfamiliar visitors, and had shown consistent food-guarding behavior since adolescence. Her feeding bowl had been placed approximately 8 inches from the interior fence line as part of the facility's standard feeding routine, and she was actively feeding when Rael approached. Rael knelt at the fence at 3:44 p.m. and reached his right arm through a chain-link opening up to the elbow, making contact with the edge of the feeding bowl. He began pulling it toward the fence. The leopard left the bowl and lunged at the fence in a single motion. Her right forepaw came through an adjacent opening and made contact with Rael's forearm, pulling it further into the fence and drawing his right shoulder and the right side of his neck flush against the chain link. She bit through the fence opening, making contact with the right side of his neck at the base of the skull. The bite was deep and sustained. She then performed a sharp lateral shaking motion while maintaining the bite, lasting approximately 3 to 4 seconds. Rael went limp. The leopard released and moved to the rear of the enclosure. The tour guide heard the disturbance from approximately 40 feet away and ran back to the enclosure. Rael was on the ground with his right arm still partially through the fence opening, not moving. The guide called for emergency services at 3:46 p.m. and remained outside the enclosure until they arrived. Paramedics arrived at 4:09 p.m., 23 minutes after the call. They documented deep lacerations to the right lateral neck, a fracture of the C2 vertebra, and injury to the cervical spinal cord consistent with a high-force rotational mechanism. Rael had no pulse on their arrival. Resuscitation was attempted at the scene, but was unsuccessful. He was pronounced dead at 4:19 p.m. The official cause of death was cervical spinal cord injury, resulting from a large animal bite and associated rotational force, consistent with the neck bite and shake pattern documented in leopard predatory behavior. A state wildlife inspector visited the facility the following morning. The leopard was not euthanized. The facility's permit was placed under review, and public tours were suspended indefinitely. No criminal charges were filed against the facility or its staff.
It was the 22nd of September 2017, and the Louisiana bayou system was sitting at the tail end of a hot season. The water warm, the vegetation dense and close, the light falling in flat, amber angles through the cypress canopy by mid-afternoon. A small production crew had been out since morning, documenting fish migration and underwater root systems in a stretch of sediment-heavy marsh water, where visibility below the surface was effectively zero beyond a few inches. Myrelle Thorne was 34 years old and worked as an independent wildlife videographer based in Baton Rouge. She had built a regional reputation on immersive footage of swamp ecosystems, the kind of material that required getting close to things most camera operators stayed back from. Fellow crew members described her as technically skilled and genuinely talented, and also as someone who, when she felt she was close to a unique shot, stopped weighing the risks of getting there the way she did at the beginning of her career. The crew had warned her multiple times throughout the day about alligator sign along the shoreline, disturbed mud, drag marks near reed beds, the presence of large males in the shallow water near the banks. She acknowledged the warnings and continued working closer to the water's edge and then below it. American alligators are ambush predators. That categorization describes not just a hunting method, but an entire biological design, a body plan, and behavioral strategy oriented around one specific outcome: getting close to something without being detected, and then closing the remaining distance faster than the target can respond. Adult male alligators in the American Southeast regularly exceed 10 feet in length, with large males reaching 12 to 15 feet and weighing between 500 and 1,000 pounds. Near sunset, Myrelle separated from the rest of the crew entirely. She was photographing underwater root systems in a section of dense shoreline vegetation where the water was shallow and the sediment was heavy enough that visibility was nearly non-existent. A large male alligator had been positioned near that shoreline, partially submerged, motionless, for an indeterminate amount of time before she entered the water. This is what I want you to keep in mind. Do not trust the waters so easily. Things like this could happen. You always need to make sure that your safety comes first before aesthetics. She almost certainly never saw it. The attack came from shallow water near the muddy bank, which is exactly where large male alligators hold position when they are waiting. Crew members heard violent splashing. After it stopped, the only sounds left were insects and the boat engine idling somewhere in the distance. Damaged equipment was recovered floating near the marsh grass later that evening. Recovery teams located her body deeper in the bayou the following morning. The alligator had not moved into her space. She had moved into its. The distinction matters because the sequence of choices that led to the outcome, the repeated warnings, the drift away from the support boats, the entry into water with zero visibility in an area with confirmed large alligator activity, was entirely constructed by a person who had spent enough time in swamp environments to know exactly what each of those decisions carried.
It was April 17th, 2015, when Zilpa Knott made a decision that would cost her everything along the pristine mangrove waterways of Kruger National Park in Australia's Northern Territory, where ancient predators lurked beneath the deceptively calm surface. The 29-year-old elementary school teacher from Brisbane had been exploring northern Australia with her husband David, a 35-year-old accountant, and their 10-year-old daughter Rachel during what was supposed to be an educational family vacation. The family had spent the morning began walking along elevated boardwalks that wound through Kakadu's spectacular wetlands. Zilpa was enthusiastic about wildlife photography and had been documenting their journey through Australia's top end, capturing images of saltwater crocodiles. The viewing platform where they stopped overlooked a tidal river that flowed past ancient mangrove forests. Rangers had posted warning signs throughout the park featuring graphic images and stark warnings about saltwater crocodiles inhabiting these waterways. During park orientation, guides had repeatedly emphasized that visitors must remain on designated boardwalks at all times, explaining that stepping near the water's edge meant entering the territory of apex predators that had remained unchanged for millions of years. The mangrove-lined river stretched before them like a mirror, its still surface betraying no hint of the prehistoric killers that patrolled these waters. David remained on the elevated platform with Rachel, taking family photos while Zilpa searched for the perfect angle. The muddy bank below appeared harmless enough, with its gentle slope leading down to the water's edge where small fish occasionally broke the surface. Saltwater crocodiles are living dinosaurs, apex predators that have remained virtually unchanged for over millions of years. These massive reptiles can grow up to 21 feet long and weigh over 1.600 pounds, making them the largest living reptile on Earth. Zilpa stepped down the muddy bank while holding her phone outward, positioning herself for what she believed would be the perfect riverside family selfie. The soft clay squelched beneath her feet as she moved within just a few feet of the waterline. David called out from the platform above, but Zilpa remained focused on framing the shot that would capture the scenic beauty of Kakadu. A massive saltwater crocodile had been lying motionless beneath the water's surface, its prehistoric eyes monitoring the human activity above. The ancient predator had detected the vibrations of footsteps approaching the water's edge, triggering hunting instincts that had been honed over millions of years. Without warning, the crocodile exploded from the water with devastating speed, its massive jaws opening wide as it launched itself toward the unsuspecting victim. Zilpa had no time to react before the prehistoric predator's powerful jaws clamped down on her leg with bone-crushing force. The crocodile's razor-sharp teeth punctured through flesh and bone as it secured its grip, then immediately began dragging her into the deeper water. The massive reptile initiated its infamous death roll, spinning rapidly in the water while maintaining its crushing grip on Zilpa's body. The violent rolling motion caused catastrophic injuries as bones snapped and joints dislocated under the tremendous rotational forces. The crocodile's powerful tail thrashed through the water as it continued the death roll, each rotation causing additional trauma to vital organs and blood vessels. The spinning motion continued relentlessly as the crocodile dragged its victim into deeper water. Zilpa's body went limp as the combination of crushing bite wounds and the violent death roll caused massive internal bleeding and spinal injuries. The crocodile finally submerged completely with its prey, disappearing beneath the murky surface. David's screams for help brought park rangers racing to the scene, but the crocodile had already vanished into the deeper channels with Zilpa's body. Emergency responders launched an immediate search operation, but the prehistoric predator had retreated to the labyrinthine waterways. Rangers eventually recovered Zilpa's remains several kilometers downstream after an extensive search operation. The investigation confirmed that drowning combined with traumatic injuries from the death roll had caused her death within minutes of the attack. The tragedy sent shockwaves through the Australian tourism industry, with many questioning how such an experienced traveler could ignore clearly posted safety warnings. Zilpa's family requested privacy during their grief, though they later supported park efforts to educate visitors about crocodile dangers. It was June 11, 2015, when marine biology graduate student Lainey Mirth waded into the darkening waters of New Smyrna Beach, Florida. The Atlantic coastline stretched endlessly in both directions, its white sand beaches giving way to murky waters where the Ponce de Leon Inlet created perfect conditions for marine life. As evening approached, the surf had calmed to gentle rollers, creating an ideal environment for the coastal species, photography that had brought Lainey to this notorious stretch of water. At 27, Lainey had dedicated her academic career to documenting near-shore fish behavior, particularly during the transitional periods when predators moved closer to shore. Her partner that evening was a 31-year-old surf instructor who had spent years navigating these waters and understood their seasonal patterns. The conditions that evening should have served as clear warnings to anyone familiar with predator behavior. Massive schools of baitfish had been reported throughout the week, their silver bodies creating dense clouds visible just beyond the sandbar. The tide was shifting from high to low, reducing water clarity and creating the murky conditions that apex predators preferred for hunting. Great white sharks are among the ocean's most formidable predators, capable of reaching lengths of 15 to 20 feet and weighing over 5,000 pounds. These apex hunters possess serrated, triangular teeth up to 3 inches long, designed for gripping and tearing through flesh and bone. Unlike smaller coastal sharks, great whites are known for their devastating hunting technique, attacking from below with tremendous force, often breaching the surface entirely. As light levels continued to drop, Lainey made her fatal decision. Despite the reduced visibility and her partner's concerns, she waded chest-deep beyond the protective sandbar. She had secured her waterproof camera to her wrist, hoping to capture the unique lighting conditions as golden hour transitioned to dusk. Just minutes before the attack, she had snapped what would become her final photograph, her partner standing waist-deep in the surf, giving a thumbs-up signal. The image captured the golden hour lighting perfectly, with the water appearing deceptively calm and inviting. Behind him, what appeared to be seaweed or a school of fish cast a dark shadow in the water, a detail that would later chill marine biologists when they realized they were looking at the massive silhouette of the great white shark already stalking the area. The great white had been patrolling the area, drawn by the abundant baitfish activity. In the fading light, Lainey's silhouette from below resembled that of a seal, the shark's preferred prey. The attack came with explosive violence from directly below. The massive shark surged upward at tremendous speed, its jaws already open. The impact lifted Lainey partially out of the water as the predator's teeth clamped down on her upper thigh and hip with devastating force. Her waterproof camera, still strapped to her wrist, was triggered into automatic burst mode by the sudden violent motion. Through the chaos of blood and water, the camera somehow captured 12 blurred frames of the encounter. Images showing the massive pale underside of the shark and its gaping jaws. The serrated teeth penetrated deep into muscle tissue, severing the femoral artery and causing catastrophic vascular damage. Her partner's screams cut through the evening air as the water exploded in violent thrashing. The great white maintained its grip for several seconds before releasing and descending back into the murky depths. Blood immediately began pouring from the massive wound, creating an expanding crimson cloud. The final photo on Lainey's camera, taken at 7:31 p.m., showed only crimson water and the fading light of dusk, a haunting testament to how quickly the ocean had turned deadly. Lainey's partner reached her within seconds. The massive bite had created a gaping wound across her upper thigh and hip, with arterial blood pumping into the water in rhythmic spurts. Nearby beachgoers and a lifeguard rushed into the water to assist. Together they pulled Lainey towards the beach, her partner maintaining pressure even as blood continued to pour between his fingers. The journey to shore consumed precious minutes as rescuers fought the current while trying to stem the massive blood loss. By the time they reached the shallows, her skin had turned deathly pale, her eyes losing focus as hypovolemic shock from the catastrophic blood loss took hold. Emergency responders arrived to find rescuers performing CPR on the sand. Despite their immediate efforts and the tourniquet applied by paramedics, the severity of the arterial damage had allowed fatal blood loss during those critical minutes in the water. Lainey was pronounced dead at the scene, approximately 12 minutes after the initial attack. When investigators retrieved Lainey's waterproof camera, the haunting sequence of images told the story of those final moments with devastating clarity. Authorities classified it as an unprovoked incident consistent with great white shark predation behavior. Analysis of the bite pattern confirmed the attacker as a large great white, likely between 14 and 16 feet in length. Laney's family established a marine safety awareness program, emphasizing the importance of understanding predator behavior before entering the water. Here's something most people don't know about Svalbard. It's a Norwegian archipelago about 600 miles north of the mainland, and polar bears outnumber humans there. The law doesn't just recommend that you carry protection outside the settlements. You're required to carry effective deterrence, which in practice is usually a rifle. Torbjorn Vikdal, a 37-year-old freelance photographer from Tromsø, knew the rule. He'd been to Svalbard twice before, both times with organized groups and armed guides. But in August 14th, 2015, he wanted to do a solo 5-day trek along the western coast to photograph glacial formations on his own schedule. No group, no guide, no schedule, just him. He rented a bolt-action rifle from an outfitter in Longyearbyen before heading out, standard procedure for solo travelers. The outfitter offered a familiarization session on the weapon. Vikdal turned it down, said he'd handled rifles before. He turned it down. A 10-minute session on the one piece of equipment that could save his life in a place where the apex predator has no fear of humans, and he said no thanks. That decision is the one I keep coming back to. On the third night, he set up camp on a gravel beach about 30 miles from the nearest settlement. The terrain along that stretch of coast is flat and exposed, with clear sight lines in every direction. No trees, no structures, just rock and gravel and the ocean. The kind of place where you'd think you could see trouble coming. But polar bears don't always announce themselves. His tent was 60 feet from the shoreline, which put it directly on a natural travel corridor that polar bears use to move along the coast. These corridors are well mapped. The outfitters in Longyearbyen will show you exactly where they run if you ask. Vikdal either didn't ask or didn't care. He also didn't set up a tripwire perimeter alarm. That's a basic precaution that the local authorities recommend for anyone camping in bear country. It's a few ounces of wire and some noisemakers that go off if anything large crosses the line. He didn't bother. It would have taken 5 minutes to set up and weighed almost nothing in his pack. Here's what makes polar bears different from almost every other bear on the planet. They don't fear humans. A brown bear or a black bear will usually avoid you. A polar bear will walk toward you, circle your camp, study you. They investigate unfamiliar things as potential food. Males regularly exceed 1,000 pounds, and they can pick up scent over long distances, especially with favorable wind. And when they commit to an attack, they go for the head and neck with a bite powerful enough to cause catastrophic trauma to the skull and spine. Norwegian authorities reconstructed the scene afterward. The bear came in from the shoreline during the early morning hours. Svalbard has perpetual daylight in August, so visibility wasn't the issue. The bear could see the tent clearly. It just didn't matter. Tracks suggested the bear had circled the tent more than once before tearing through the fabric. The rifle was found inside the tent, still zipped in its carrying case. Still in the case. That's the detail I can't get past. He carried that rifle for 3 days and never once took it out of the bag. The only thing that could have saved him was packed away like luggage while a 1,000-pound predator circled his tent. The damage to the campsite was consistent with a sustained attack. Vikdal never got to the rifle. A passing vessel later noticed the damaged campsite and reported it. Responders reached the site by helicopter. The official cause of death was massive trauma to the head and upper body. In this case, authorities tracked and euthanized the bear 3 days later. 3 mistakes stacked on top of each other, and any one of them undone probably changes the outcome. It was March 7th, 2015, outside Lockhart, Texas, at a small private animal sanctuary, operating on a limited state permit. The facility had been running for 11 years on a series of renewals and had received 2 compliance notices in the 3 years prior to the incident. The tiger enclosure was a chain-link structure measuring roughly 40 by 60 feet, with a single entry gate secured by a sliding bolt latch. It contained an elevated wooden platform, a water trough, and a feeding station along the far wall. Tanner Gribby was 31 years old and based in San Antonio, and had been producing exotic animal content for just over 2 years. He visited private sanctuaries, roadside zoos, and exotic animal auctions across Texas and neighboring states, building his content around proximity, getting closer to animals than most visitors were permitted, and framing it as a natural connection rather than a safety violation. He had no formal animal handling training and held no certifications of any kind. He had visited the Lockhart facility twice before, and on his second visit, posted a video from the tiger enclosure fence line that received more engagement than anything else on his channel. In the comments, he told a viewer he intended to go inside on his next visit. The resident Bengal tiger was a 9-year-old male weighing approximately 410 pounds, raised at the facility since 14 months old, and never trained for human contact beyond the feeding routine. The facility owner had made it explicitly clear on Tanner's second visit that enclosure entry was not permitted under any circumstances. Tanner posted a video 3 days before the incident, stating he believed the tiger would recognize him. On the day of the incident, a facility volunteer saw him moving toward the gate and walked to find the owner when he didn't respond to her. The Bengal tiger is one of the largest land predators in the world, with adult males commonly weighing between 380 and 480 pounds and measuring up to 10 feet from nose to tail. A tiger's forelimb strike carries enough force to fracture the skull of a large bovine in a single blow. A captive tiger that tolerates a familiar human at a fence line behaves fundamentally differently when that person enters the enclosure. The enclosed space triggers a territorial response that overrides any prior conditioning, and the transition from stillness to contact typically occurs in under 2 seconds. Tanner unlatched the gate at 2:17 p.m. and stepped inside, pulling it closed behind him. The tiger was resting on the elevated platform at the far end of the enclosure, approximately 35 feet away. Tanner moved several steps forward and lowered himself into a crouch with both arms extended outward, a posture he had described in previous videos as non-threatening. The tiger rose from the platform within 4 seconds. It did not vocalize. It came off the platform and covered the 35-foot distance in under 2 seconds. Tanner did not move toward the gate. The tiger's right forepaw made contact with Tanner's upper chest and left shoulder in a downward strike. The force drove him straight down onto the compacted dirt floor. The impact was audible from outside the fence line. Tanner did not attempt to rise. The tiger stood over him for approximately 20 seconds before stepping away and moving toward the water trough at the side of the enclosure. This behavior, while not universal, has been observed in captive big cat incidents, where the initial strike fully incapacitates the subject and the animal registers no continued movement or resistance. A tiger that does not perceive ongoing threat or prey behavior after a strike will sometimes disengage without resuming contact. The facility volunteer heard the impact from outside and did not enter the enclosure area. The owner arrived approximately 5 minutes later, used a compressed air horn and a feed bucket to draw the tiger toward the interior divider gate, secured it, and entered the outer section. Tanner was unresponsive. His breathing was shallow and his audibly compromised. The left side of his chest had sustained visible deformation, consistent with severe blunt force trauma. Paramedics arrived at 2:46 p.m. Tanner was intubated at the scene and transported to a regional medical center. He was in cardiac arrest on arrival and could not be resuscitated. He was pronounced dead at 3:31 p.m. The official cause of death was hemorrhagic shock, secondary to blunt force thoracic trauma. 4 ribs on the left side had fractured on impact, 2 of which displaced inward and lacerated the left lung, leading to internal bleeding that could not be controlled in the field. The facility was cited for enclosure access control failures and inadequate visitor supervision following an inspection several days later. It suspended public visits within 3 weeks and did not reopen. The tiger was relocated to a larger state-permitted facility in East Texas. No criminal charges were filed against the owner. Tanner's accounts were made private by a family member and later permanently removed.
It was the 9th of April, 2013, and the Northern Territory of Australia was settling into the kind of night that arrives in the tropics. Warm, humid, the air carrying the particular smell of still water and vegetation that defines the region's wetland country after dark. A weekend gathering at a riverside property had been going on for several hours. The water beyond the observation deck was dark and effectively opaque. The dock extended out over a tidal waterway that had documented saltwater crocodile activity active enough that warning signs had been posted on the property before any of the guests arrived. Terrian Holt was 31 years old and worked as a property broker in Darwin. He was social in the way that some people are professionally social and personally social, simultaneously, always with a group, always with something being recorded, always with some version of the current moment being prepared for an audience somewhere. This guy had spent much of the evening on and around the observation deck, leaning over the railing, trying to frame the black water below him into an image worth keeping. So, I wouldn't exactly think that something could happen either. Saltwater crocodiles are the largest living reptile species on Earth. Adult males in the Australian Northern Territory regularly exceed 15 feet in length and can weigh upward of 1,000 pounds. They are ambush predators of extraordinary capability, patient, cold-blooded, and capable of remaining motionless in dark water for extended periods while appearing to be nothing more than a shadow beneath the surface. Saltwater crocodiles in Australia have been documented approaching occupied structures at night docks, boat ramps, areas of human activity near water with no visible movement and no vocalization. The attack, when it comes, is not preceded by any observable warning behavior. Terrian was leaning over the railing of the dock, extending his phone outward over the water to capture the reflection of the lights on the surface below him, when a large saltwater crocodile rose from directly beneath the dock, seized him by the shoulder and upper chest, and pulled him violently into the water. The time between the crocodile becoming visible and Terrian hitting the water was not enough for anyone on the dock to intervene. Friends heard the impact and saw movement near the surface briefly, before the water went still. Rescue crews recovered his phone near the edge of the dock. The crocodile was never found. Honestly, the warning signs at the property had described exactly this kind of risk. They were specific enough that anyone who read them and then chose to lean over the railing over dark water at night had made a calculation that the risk described did not apply to the current situation or did not apply to them, was acceptable for the purpose of getting the image they were trying to get. That calculation was wrong in the specific, irreversible way that only becomes obvious.
Don't go in the water after dark. That was the rule at a small eco-lodge built on stilts along the Tapajos River in Para State, deep in the Brazilian Amazon. Remote, quiet, surrounded by water on three sides. The lodge hosted maybe a dozen international visitors at a time. No fences, no barriers between the buildings and the river. The lead guide, a 48-year-old local man who'd grown up on the river, made the rule clear during every orientation. He'd point to the river from the dock and say the same thing to every new group. During the day, this is your river. After dark, it belongs to them. Crivaldo Soares was a 31-year-old environmental studies graduate student from Lisbon, Portugal. He'd come to the lodge in late October 26, 2017, during a gap between academic terms, doing informal field observations. The staff liked him. He was smart, curious, and knew his tropical ecology. But the guides noticed something about Crivaldo that made them uneasy. His confidence around Amazonian wildlife felt like it was running ahead of his actual experience. That gap between knowledge and experience is something I think about a lot in these stories. Crivaldo could probably name every species in that river. He'd studied the food chains, the predator behavior, the seasonal patterns, and somehow all of that information made him feel safer instead of more careful. On his fourth night, the heat was unbearable. He'd spent the day hiking and came back soaked in sweat. The lodge had no air conditioning, just river breezes and ceiling fans. The generator had shut off at 10, and by midnight, the only sounds were insect and the slow current against the stilt. Other guests saw him leave his room and walk down the wooden stairs to the floating dock with a towel. He stepped off the dock into the shallows. The water was warm. The river moved slowly past the dock pilings. A guest in a nearby room heard what may have been a short shout, then a burst of violent splashing that lasted only seconds. Then the river went quiet. By the time the guide reached the dock with a spotlight, the surface had settled flat. Crivaldo was gone. That silence. The splashing stops and the water just goes still, like nothing happened. Every time I read about a water attack, that's the part that gets to me. The river doesn't care. It just closes over and moves on. What happened beneath the surface follows a pattern that's well documented with black cayman. These are the largest aquatic predators in the Amazon. Big males can reach 16 feet and over 800 pounds, and their dark coloring makes them almost invisible in the murky water of tributary channels. They hunt by ambush, lying still near the bank until something enters the water. The strike is fast and lateral. Jaws clamp on, and then the cayman drags the victim into deeper water. Victims often drown during the initial drag, sometimes before any rolling behavior begins. Search teams launched at first light. Fishermen and wildlife officers combed the tributary in canoes, checking the banks and probing submerged debris. Within the next day or two, they recovered partial remains about half a mile downstream, caught against a submerged root system. The injuries were consistent with a large cayman attack. Drowning during the initial drag was the most likely cause of death. Crivaldo's towel was still on the dock where he'd left it. His sandals were at the bottom of the stairs.